The battered fishing trawler, the Sea Wolf, wrestled violently with the monstrous waves off the unforgiving New England coast. Above, the sky ripped open with furious flashes of lightning, briefly illuminating the churning black maw of the Atlantic before plunging everything back into Stygian darkness. Rain lashed down, mingling with the stinging spray, making visibility almost zero. Each colossal wave threatened to swallow the small vessel whole, tossing it like a toy amidst the tempest's wrath. In the distance, a solitary lighthouse, a supposed beacon of salvation, flickered erratically. Its light, meant to cut through the storm's fury with unwavering strength, was instead an anemic, dying pulse, weak, intermittent, agonizingly unreliable. On board, Finn, a young man of 20, fought with desperate strength against the helm, his knuckles white, his young face etched with grim determination and raw terror, his gaze desperately fixed on that unstable, failing promise of light. Finn's father, a weathered fisherman with a lifetime of experience etched into his face, battled alongside him, their silent, synchronized struggle a testament to years spent together on these treacherous waters. But even his father's stoic strength seemed to wane under the onslaught. The flickering beam of the lighthouse was their only hope, yet its uncertainty was a torment. Each fading pulse sent a fresh wave of panic through Finn, a chilling premonition that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a storm, it felt like a deliberate act of betrayal by the very sentinel meant to protect them. The air was thick with the scent of salt and fear, and the deafening roar of the wind and waves was punctuated only by the ominous groans of the stressed wooden hull, each creak a testament to its impending demise. Amidst the chaos, fragmented images, fleeting and disturbing, pierced through Finn's consciousness like shards of ice. He saw an older man, a lighthouse keeper, his face a mask of unsettling emptiness, his hand deliberately turning a heavy brass valve on a mechanism. The action was slow, methodical, imbued with a chilling purpose. Another flash, an ancient brittle map of the New England coastline, marked with strange, unsettling crosses at various points, each one a silent indicator of some grim tally. Then, a whisper, faint yet insistent, seemed to echo in his mind's ear, a phrase he might have heard somewhere, sometime. The coast claims its due. The These visions were unsettling, disconnected, yet they resonated with an eerie, unshakable sense of premonition, hinting at a darker, more deliberate hand behind the lighthouse's unsettling behavior. The storm reached its crescendo, and in that moment of absolute fury, the lighthouse beam, their last fragile thread of hope, abruptly extinguished. Total darkness descended, thick and suffocating, swallowing the boat, the raging sea, and Finn's last vestiges of composure. The sudden void of light was more terrifying than any monster the storm could conjure. In the ensuing panic, amidst the deafening roar of the tempest, a horrifying sound pierced through the chaos. A sharp, splintering crack from beneath their feet, a deep, resonant groan of wood giving way. It was the unmistakable sound of their boat's keel, their only salvation, succumbing to the relentless assault of the hidden rocks. Their vessel had met its doom, precisely when its guiding light had failed. Terror seized Finn's throat, a primal scream trapped in his lungs. His eyes, wide and wild with horror, darted through the inky blackness, desperately searching for his father. "Father!" he bellowed, his voice raw and desperate, but only the wind and the crashing waves answered him. His gaze, illuminated by a fleeting, distant lightning flash, momentarily caught the ominous, darkened silhouette of the lighthouse, standing like a silent, indifferent giant against the raging sky. The image was burned into his memory, a beacon turned betrayer, a silent witness to their destruction. The scene ended with the agonizing, drawn-out sound of timber tearing apart, the terrifying certainty of their imminent shipwreck. The question hung heavy in the air, chilling him to his core. Was this a cruel twist of fate, an unfortunate accident of the storm? Or was the lighthouse's sudden, total failure a deliberate, calculated act? The answer, he instinctively knew, held a horror far deeper than the raging sea itself. 2 months before the devastating tempest and the lighthouse's inexplicable silence, Finn arrived on the rugged, wind-swept shores of the New England coast. A young man of 20, he possessed an inherent optimism that shone through his earnest eyes and a natural aptitude for all things mechanical. Growing up inland, he had always been drawn to the sea's mystique, and the opportunity to become an assistant lighthouse keeper was a thrilling adventure. It represented a fresh start, a chance to prove his capabilities in a unique, vital role. He brought with him a small toolkit, a worn book on maritime engineering, and a youthful eagerness to learn and contribute. The briny air, the cry of gulls, and the endless expanse of the ocean filled him with a sense of purpose and excitement for the solitary yet profound task ahead. The lighthouse itself stood as a formidable solitary sentinel, a towering pillar of stone against the relentless onslaught of the waves and wind. Perched precariously on a jagged outcrop of rock, far from the nearest village, it commanded a panoramic view of the vast, indifferent Atlantic. The stark beauty of the New England coast, with its dramatic cliffs and crashing surf, was breathtaking, yet it was a beauty tinged with an undeniable wildness. Finn, accustomed to the bustle of a small town, initially found the profound isolation exhilarating. The rhythmic churn of the sea, the stark silence broken only by the elements, offered a profound sense of peace. However, as the days bled into weeks, the sheer, unyielding solitude began to subtly chip away at his initial enthusiasm, replacing it with a quiet, creeping sense of being utterly alone in a vast, indifferent world. Upon his arrival, Finn was introduced to Elias, the principal lighthouse keeper, the man who would be his mentor and sole companion for the foreseeable future. Elias was a figure carved from the granite of the coast itself, a man of formidable silence and sparse words, his face etched with the deep lines of time and exposure to the relentless sea winds. His gaze, often distant, seemed perpetually lost on the horizon, as if searching for something far beyond the visible reach of the ocean, or perhaps lost within a private, internal world. He moved with a quiet, unhurried precision, his presence a stark contrast to Finn's youthful exuberance, embodying the stoicism demanded by a life of lonely vigilance. Elias's demeanor was initially interpreted by Finn as simply the hardened stoicism of a veteran seaman, a man shaped by the isolating demands of his profession. The old keeper was undeniably meticulous, almost ritualistic in his duties. Every piece of machinery was maintained with scrupulous care, every task performed with unwavering precision. The massive lamp, the intricate gears, the winding stairs, all were testament to Elias's dedication to the lighthouse's operation. Yet, beneath this veneer of professional competence, Finn sensed an unsettling detachment. Elias seemed less like a living, breathing man, and more like a spectral presence, moving through the lighthouse's chambers with an eerie, almost pre-programmed grace, his movements lacking the casual humanity Finn was accustomed to. This subtle disquiet grew with each passing day. Elias rarely offered conversation, and when he did, his words were clipped, almost devoid of inflection, revealing nothing of his inner thoughts or feelings. He maintained a palpable distance, creating an invisible barrier that Finn, despite his best efforts, could not breach. There was a profound emptiness in Elias's eyes when he wasn't focused on his duties, a vacant stare that hinted at a mind far away, perhaps haunted by the solitude or by something far more sinister. Finn found himself constantly on edge in the old man's presence, a persistent, unarticulated discomfort gnawing at him. He knew, instinctively, that there was more to Elias than met the eye, a deeper mystery concealed behind the keeper's taciturn facade and unsettlingly methodical routine. Finn, despite the growing unease spurred by Elias's spectral presence and the relentless isolation, threw himself into his duties with youthful zeal. He embraced the intricate mechanics of the lighthouse, learning the precise movements required to maintain the massive lamp, to polish the reflective lenses until they gleamed, and to wind the clockwork mechanism that rotated the beam. His innate talent for machinery allowed him to quickly master the technical aspects of the keeper's role, and he found a sense of satisfaction in the rhythm of the work. However, this dedication also sharpened his observational skills. His youthful optimism, though slightly dimmed by the solitude, kept him attentive, and it wasn't long before his meticulous nature began to register subtle yet persistent anomalies in Elias's otherwise rigid routines, hints of something profoundly unsettling beneath the surface of their isolated existence. Elias's routine for the lighthouse lamp was a meticulously choreographed nightly ritual, a precise sequence of checks, adjustments, and ignitement that ensured the powerful beam cut through the darkness without fail. Finn studied it, learning every step. But as weeks turned into a month, Finn began to notice a disturbing deviation from this established pattern, an inconsistency that defied logical explanation. On certain nights, particularly those blessed with crystal-clear skies and a tranquil, almost glassy sea, conditions where the light's full strength should have been an undisputed blessing, Elias would perform an additional, unscripted adjustment. With a deliberate, almost imperceptible turn of a hidden valve or a subtle manipulation of a lever, the mighty lamp's intense glow would visibly dim, sometimes to a mere whisper of its former power, a dangerous flicker against the vast expanse of the ocean. This deliberate dimming of the light, always on nights of optimal visibility, sent a shiver of profound unease through Finn. It was an act that defied the very purpose of a lighthouse. Why would Elias, a man so meticulous in every other aspect of his duties, intentionally weaken the beacon when it was least needed, yet most effective? Finn's mechanical mind wrestled with the illogicality of it. He began to correlate these strange occurrences with the passing of ships, wondering if any vessels had been navigating the coast on those specific nights. The unsettling pattern recurred with enough regularity to dismiss it as an accident or a malfunction. It was a conscious, controlled decision made by Elias, a silent act of subtle sabotage that left Finn bewildered and deeply disturbed, hinting at a darker intent. Driven by a burgeoning sense of dread and a desperate need for answers, Finn began to covertly explore the small, sparsely furnished office that Elias kept locked. One afternoon, while Elias was performing his routine checks on the lower levels of the lighthouse, Finn managed to pick the simple lock, his heart hammering in his chest. Inside, amidst stacks of old logbooks and navigational charts, he discovered several ancient sea-stained maps of the local coastline, rolled and tucked away in a dusty cabinet. These weren't standard nautical charts. They were marked with strange, handwritten annotations and symbols. Cryptic crosses, circles, and indecipherable words scrawled in faded ink littered the treacherous rocky outcrops and shoals, unsettling him further. As Finn unfurled the maps, his gaze traced the unfamiliar markings. The crosses, in particular, caught his eye. They seemed to be positioned at points of known danger, but with an unsettling specificity that suggested more than just warning markers. Some were accompanied by dates, others by strange, almost ritualistic symbols that Finn couldn't interpret. A chilling realization began to form. These weren't simply records of maritime hazards. They appeared to be tracking something else entirely. Perhaps a history of unfortunate events, or more ominously, a chronicle of specific incidents. The meticulousness of the markings, combined with Elias's strange habits, painted a picture far darker than mere cartography. It was a secret history of the coastline, intimately linked to the lighthouse and perhaps to the very purpose of Elias's isolated vigil. During his infrequent and brief trips to the nearest fishing village, a welcome respite from the lighthouse's profound isolation, Finn began to hear unsettling tales. The rough-hewn fishermen, weathered by years of battling the unforgiving Atlantic, often gathered in the dimly lit tavern, their voices low and gruff as they shared stories. What caught Finn's attention were the recurring anecdotes about the bad luck associated with the lighthouse. They spoke of vessels that had inexplicably vanished, not in the fury of a storm, but on nights that should have been calm and clear. Evenings when the lighthouse beam ought to have been a steadfast guide. These weren't mere accidents, the fisherman muttered, but rather mysterious disappearances, almost as if the sea itself had reached out to claim them, even in fair weather. The stories painted a chilling picture. Ships, known for their seaworthiness and captained by experienced hands, would set sail under auspicious conditions, only to be never seen again. The peculiar consistency was that these losses often occurred when the sea was placid and the stars were bright, circumstances under which a well-maintained lighthouse should have offered absolute protection. The fishermen would shake their heads, their eyes holding a haunted, knowing look, attributing these tragedies to something beyond ordinary maritime hazards. They spoke of an unholy capriciousness of the local waters, a malevolent spirit that defied logic and navigational skill, feeding into Finn's growing unease about Elias's peculiar dimming of the light. Among the elder fishermen, there was a particular deference, a quiet awe, surrounding the most ancient and ominous tale of all, the legend of the sea's claim. Old Man Tiber, a grizzled mariner whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles, spoke of it with a solemnity that silenced the tavern. He recounted how, since time immemorial, the boundless ocean was believed to demand a periodic price from those who dared to sail upon it or dwell by its shores. This wasn't merely about storms or harsh conditions. It was a deeper, more fundamental demand, an insatiable hunger that manifested at arbitrary intervals. The claim was an ancient tax, a dark, primordial force asserting its dominion over human endeavors. What truly sent a shiver down Finn's spine was Tiber's elaboration on the lighthouse keeper's role within this grim legend. According to the old man, the keeper was not solely a guardian of lives, a beacon of salvation. No, the keeper of this particular lighthouse had a far more sinister inherited duty. When the sea's claim was due, it fell upon the keeper to fulfill a harrowing role, not to save, but to deliver. The light, meant to guide, was to be manipulated, made to falter or dim on specific nights, subtly luring ships onto the treacherous shoals and jagged rocks. It was a role of chilling complicity, a silent agreement to facilitate the ocean's dark appetite in exchange for its relative calm and generosity during other periods. The fragments of these conversations, the unsettling pattern of the dimmed light, and the sinister legend of the sea's claim began to invade Finn's nights. His sleep became a tormented landscape of vivid, disturbing nightmares. He would find himself trapped in the colossal lantern room, the massive lens spinning uselessly as thick darkness swallowed the world beyond. In these dreams, ships, their sails torn and hulls listing, would emerge from the gloom, their crews screaming silent, desperate pleas as they crashed against jagged rocks, the sound of splintering wood, the cries of the drowning, and the relentless roar of the waves became the soundtrack to his torment. More terrifying still were the voices. They would emerge from the swirling depths of the dream ocean, not distinct words, but a cacophony of whispering, slithering sounds, ancient and hungry. They spoke of demands, of fulfillment, of a relentless appetite. And amidst these disembodied utterances, one word would emerge with chilling clarity, echoing with an insistent, almost hypnotic rhythm: claim. It was the same word from the old fisherman's legend, now a spectral command, seeming to emanate directly from the dark heart of the sea itself, pressing upon Finn with an unbearable weight of malevolent expectation, making his heart race even in the clutches of sleep. He would wake abruptly, gasping for air, drenched in a cold sweat, the phantom whispers still clinging to the edges of his consciousness. The once comforting thrum of the lighthouse machinery now seemed ominous, its rhythmic pulse a countdown to some unknown horror. The profound isolation, once a source of quiet peace, now intensified his paranoia, making him feel utterly vulnerable and alone in the face of these growing fears. The lighthouse, this monumental symbol of safety, began to feel like a prison, a silent, complicit accomplice to the dark demands of the ocean. Finn knew with a chilling certainty that his initial optimism had been utterly naive. He had stumbled into a place where the line between natural phenomena and ancient sinister purpose was terrifyingly blurred. The relentless assault of disquieting observations, unsettling local legends, and tormenting nightmares pushed Finn to a critical juncture. His youthful optimism had been irrevocably eroded, replaced by a desperate, gnawing need for definitive answers. The subtle anomalies in Elias's routine, the fisherman's whispered tales of the sea's claim, and the haunting echoes of 5 in his dreams coalesced into an unbearable weight of suspicion. Finn could no longer simply observe, he had to act. He understood with a chilling clarity that the truth, however horrific, was preferable to the suffocating torment of not knowing. He resolved to delve deeper, to uncover the hidden mechanism behind Elias's unsettling behavior, even if it meant risking the old keeper's wrath, or worse, confirming his deepest fears. His personal investigation began with Elias himself. Finn meticulously observed the keeper's patterns, noting the times he was most likely to be away from his office, performing his rounds in the lower levels of the lighthouse, or simply lost in his characteristic, distant reverie. Finn learned to move with a newfound stealth, his young body adapting to the quiet creaks and groans of the old structure, allowing him to traverse the winding stairs and narrow corridors with minimal sound. His heart would pound with a mixture of fear and adrenaline during these clandestine movements, but the urgency of his quest, the chilling possibility of what he might uncover, overrode his apprehension. He became a shadow in his own workplace, constantly searching for an opportunity to access Elias's private domain. One particularly foggy afternoon, with Elias occupied meticulously cleaning the massive foghorn, Finn found his chance. He slipped into the keeper's small, Spartan office, his breath held tight in his chest. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, salt, and something else, a faint, metallic tang that Finn couldn't place. His eyes immediately scanned the room, searching for anything out of place, anything that might serve as a clue. He cautiously rifled through Elias's few personal effects, his worn clothing, a sparse collection of books on navigation and local history. Nothing seemed overtly sinister, but the sheer lack of personal warmth in the room was in itself unsettling, a reflection of the old keeper's enigmatic nature. His search eventually led him to a small, unassuming wooden chest tucked beneath a loose floorboard near Elias's cot. It was well hidden, almost camouflaged by years of dust and neglect, suggesting it contained something of profound significance that Elias wished to keep secret. With trembling hands, Finn pried open the lid. Inside, nestled among a few yellowed photographs of stern-faced figures he didn't recognize, he found it. A small, leather-bound diary, its pages brittle and faded, filled with a cramped, spidery script. The handwriting was archaic, clearly not Elias's, suggesting it belonged to an earlier keeper, perhaps an ancestor, a predecessor in the isolated vigil. This was not Elias's diary, but perhaps the source of Elias's chilling beliefs. As Finn began to decipher the faded script, a cold dread began to seep into his bones, far deeper and more terrifying than any he had experienced before. The diary was a chronicle of a dark, generations-old pact. It described in stark, chilling detail a deeply ingrained belief in a malevolent entity or an ancient hidden power residing within the turbulent waters of the New England coast. This entity, the diary asserted, demanded periodic sacrifices from those who sought to master its domain. The language was less about a physical being and more about a primordial force, an insatiable hunger of the sea itself that required appeasement to prevent utter devastation to the coastal communities. The sheer weight of such an ancient, horrific belief system was almost unbearable. The most terrifying revelation, however, concerned the true, unholy role of the lighthouse keeper within this dark tradition. The diary explicitly detailed that the keeper was not a mere guardian of lives, an unwavering beacon of hope. No, the keeper was a conceder, a facilitator of these very sacrifices. On specific nights, when the claim was deemed due by the entity, the keeper's sacred duty was to deliberately diminish the light, to dim the powerful beam that guided ships safely. This act of calculated betrayal was intended to guide unsuspecting vessels towards the treacherous shoals and jagged rocks of the coastline, orchestrating their doom. This horrific duty, the diary claimed, was the price paid for the sea's calm during other periods, a macabre bargain to ensure safe passage for the many by sacrificing the few. The words burned into Finn's mind, transforming his perception of the lighthouse and Elias irrevocably. The old keeper was not just eccentric or taciturn, he was a silent accomplice to murder, a dutiful servant to a monstrous, ancient power. The lighthouse, this monumental structure built for salvation, was in fact a meticulously maintained instrument of perdition. Finn's youthful worldview shattered, replaced by a profound horror. The dimming of the light, the peculiar maps, the whispered legends, all clicked into place, forming a coherent, utterly terrifying picture. He understood now with a chilling certainty the true nature of Elias's isolated vigil, and the terrible legacy that now, by proximity, threatened to ensnare him as well. The chilling revelations from the old diary had prepared Finn for a profound horror, yet nothing could have truly braced him for witnessing the act itself. One clear, star-dusted night, the kind of night where the lighthouse beam should have cut through the darkness with unwavering brilliance, Finn watched from a hidden vantage point as Elias ascended to the lantern room. The old keeper moved with his usual methodical precision, but tonight his actions were imbued with a terrifying, deliberate purpose. Finn's heart hammered as he observed Elias approach the massive lamp mechanism, not to adjust it for optimal brightness, but to carefully, almost reverently, turn a specific brass valve. With each precise rotation, the powerful light visibly dimmed, its radiant promise fading to a mere inadequate glow against the vast, unforgiving expanse of the ocean. A cold, sickening dread washed over Finn, confirming every nightmare, every whispered legend. His gaze, tearing away from the diminishing light, swept across the dark sea. In the distance, a small fishing trawler, its silhouette barely discernible against the horizon, was steadily approaching the treacherous rocky coastline. Its course, guided by the now failing beam, was dangerously close to the jagged reefs that lay hidden beneath the calm surface. Despair, sharp and overwhelming, seized Finn. He understood, with horrifying clarity, that this was not merely a malfunction, it was a deliberate act of sabotage, a premeditated sacrifice unfolding before his very eyes, orchestrated by the man who was meant to save them. The sight of the unsuspecting vessel heading towards its doom, lured by a false beacon, was an agonizing torment. Unable to remain a silent witness to such a heinous act, Finn erupted from his hiding spot, storming into the lantern room. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the rhythmic hum of the lamp mechanism now sounding like a sinister countdown. "Elias, what are you doing?" Finn's voice, raw with outrage and desperation, cut through the quiet hum, echoing against the glass walls of the tower. Elias slowly turned, his aged face illuminated by the now failing light. There was no surprise, no anger, no flicker of emotion in his eyes, only that familiar, unsettling emptiness that had always made Finn uneasy. His expression was utterly placid, a mask of grim resignation that was far more terrifying than any overt display of malice. "It is my obligation," Elias stated, his voice flat and devoid of inflection, devoid of any human warmth. His words, chillingly calm, carried the weight of generations of dark duty. He spoke of the peace that such actions brought, not to himself, but to the turbulent waters, to the land itself. His explanation, delivered with the quiet conviction of a man utterly convinced of his own righteous, albeit horrific, purpose, was a chilling echo of the diary's revelations. He articulated a logic so distorted, so deeply ingrained in a belief system that transcended humanity, that Finn struggled to comprehend it. Elias seemed possessed, not by an external demon, but by an internal, ancient conviction that transformed a monstrous act into a sacred duty, a necessary evil for a greater, unspoken balance. "You're murdering them," Finn roared, his youthful idealism clashing violently with Elias's cold, ancient conviction. His gaze darted from the impassive face of the keeper to the now dangerously dim lamp, then back out to the approaching trawler, its fate hanging precariously in the balance. Without another thought, Finn lunged towards the lamp mechanism, his hands reaching for the valve, desperate to reverse Elias's action, to restore the full saving power of the light. But Elias, despite his age, moved with surprising speed, blocking Finn's path. The keeper's eyes, though emotionless, held a fierce, unyielding resolve, a silent declaration that he would not permit Finn to interfere with his sacred, terrible task. A desperate struggle erupted within the confines of the lantern room. It was a brutal, silent battle, the metallic clang of their bodies against the machinery mingling with the frantic creaks of the old tower. Finn fought with the strength of desperate hope, driven by the knowledge of the imminent disaster approaching from the sea. Elias, fueled by the unwavering conviction of his dark duty, resisted with an unyielding, almost supernatural force. The fight was not merely physical. It was a symbolic clash between light and darkness, between the inherent human instinct for salvation and the grim, inherited burden of perdition. Each grapple, each push, each strained breath was a testament to this fundamental conflict, a desperate attempt to decide the fate of the innocent lives unknowingly approaching their doom. Finn wrestled with all his might, his youthful strength pitted against Elias's experience and grim resolve. He tried to overpower the old keeper, to tear him away from the controls, to force the valve back to its original position. Elias, however, held firm, his grip surprisingly strong, his body rigid and unyielding. The fight was frantic, chaotic, a desperate dance on the precipice of life and death, both for the men in the tower and the distant ship. The stakes were immeasurable, the outcome uncertain. Each man was fighting for his own truth, his own vision of duty and salvation or sacrifice, and the fate of the approaching trawler, ignorant of the battle raging above it, hung precariously, dependent on who would ultimately prevail in this silent, brutal struggle for the light. The desperate struggle between Finn and Elias in the lantern room culminated in a catastrophic event. In the furious exchange, a misstep, a powerful blow, or a desperate lunge caused the fragile, intricate mechanism of the main lamp to shatter, or perhaps Elias himself was incapacitated, falling awkwardly, leaving him still and unresponsive amidst the wreckage. With a deafening crash and a final mournful groan of twisting metal and breaking glass, the mighty light of the lighthouse, the beacon meant to guide and protect, was utterly extinguished. Total darkness, thick and absolute, swallowed the tower and the raging sea beyond, mirroring the very opening scene of Finn's desperate flight. The silence that followed the destructive cacophony was more profound than any sound, a chilling testament to the broken promise of safety. In the terrifying void left by the extinguished light and the storm's unrelenting fury, Finn was forced to bear witness to the unspeakable. From the now darkened lantern room, he saw the distant dark silhouette of his father's trawler, the Sea Wolf, succumb to the treacherous coast. The faint, agonizing sounds of splintering wood carried on the wind, followed by a final guttural groan of the hull, tearing apart on the jagged rocks. He screamed his father's name into the tempest, a raw, primal cry of anguish and despair, but there was no response, only the cold, indifferent roar of the ocean claiming its due. The image of the wrecked vessel, the knowledge of his father's final desperate moments, became an indelible scar on his soul, a harrowing trauma that would forever define his existence on that isolated rock. The crushing weight of guilt and profound grief descended upon Finn, a heavy shroud smothering his spirit. He was alone in the darkened lighthouse, the storm slowly subsiding, leaving behind only the rhythmic, mournful crash of waves against the rocks. The Sea Wolf was gone, his father lost to the sea, and in the oppressive quiet of the tower, the chilling logic Elias had espoused began to echo in Finn's tormented mind. The whispers of the sea, once a distant ethereal threat in his dreams, now seemed to press in from all sides, tangible and insistent, speaking of demands, of the claim, of the necessity of balance. He felt the insidious grip of the same pressure that had driven Elias, a silent, ancient imperative compelling him to continue the cycle, to become the next conceder for the sea's insatiable hunger. The solitude of the lighthouse, once merely isolating, became a crucible for Finn's tormented psyche. He was haunted by the image of his father's demise, by the knowledge that the lighthouse, meant to save, had been a tool of destruction. The chilling words of Elias, the cryptic entries in the old diary, all pointed to a terrible inherited duty. Finn stood at a precipice, feeling the immense weight of the cycle pressing down on him, offering a perverse form of peace in exchange for unspeakable acts. He could succumb, adopting Elias's empty gaze and methodical cruelty, becoming the new keeper who darkened the lamp on clear nights. This path promised a dark form of continuity, a grim perpetuation of the ancient pact. Alternatively, Finn could attempt to break the cycle, to defy the sea's claim and the twisted legacy of the lighthouse keepers. This might involve a desperate act, perhaps finding a way to permanently disable the lighthouse, to destroy its capacity for deception, or to alter its very purpose. He might consider sacrificing himself, a final, defiant act to ensure no more lives were lost to its sinister game. But such a choice would be fraught with immense peril, challenging an ancient unseen force that Elias had served with unwavering devotion. It would mean facing the unknown wrath of the sea, a potentially catastrophic price for defying a centuries-old pact, risking not just his own life, but perhaps unleashing a far greater, unpredictable fury upon the coast. The final moments of Finn's story remain shrouded in a profound ambiguity, leaving a lingering, unsettling question for the observer. Does he, driven by grief and the relentless psychological torment, ultimately succumb to the pervasive pressure, becoming the new, empty-eyed keeper who continues the dark cycle, dutifully dimming the lamp on clear nights? Or does he find a desperate, perhaps self-destructive way to shatter the ancient pact, breaking the chain of sacrifice, forever altering the fate of the lighthouse and the sea? The narrative concludes with the fate of the cycle hanging precariously in the balance, a haunting uncertainty. The lighthouse stands, a stark silhouette against the turbulent coast, and the question remains, was the monstrous cycle truly broken, or did it simply find a new, tormented zealotr to continue its grim, silent work?